Oh, crap. Welcome to another episode of Touring the AFC South. I am your host, Mike Patton, and on this episode, we're going to be talking a whole bunch of Houston Texans football. And I thought of none other than Miss Kim White Davis of Chalk Talk, perfect person to bring on to talk about the Houston Texans. How are you doing, Kim?
I'm good. How are you, Mike?
Doing great, doing great. You know, you sport a name that of one of my favorite cousins, so you're already in great company at that aspect already.
I didn't know that.
Yep, yep. So, well, we're gonna get to the Houston Texans and talk about everything that's going on with them. But of course, like I do with every episode, we got the get off your chest segment, and this one, I've got to tell y'all, fans. Athletes are humans too. Again, fans, athletes are humans too. Now you see these athletes going to OTAs and different things like that, and some of them being there and some of them not being there. Just want to let you fans know that they are optional. They aren't necessarily something that people have to be at. Now, I know you want them to be at every single thing and spend every waking hour there at the facility. But that's not realistic because, let's take a look at your job. Are you spending every day waking hour at your job trying to be the superstar employee? I bet you that answer is no. So, let them enjoy time doing things they want to do. CJ Stroud wants to jump on a podcast, talk. Let him jump on a podcast and talk. He is sitting down. He isn't going somewhere snowboarding where he can break his arm or something. So let him do that. I know Stephon Diggs did a lot. He did a lot. And I know him and Mike Vrabel talked about it. But he still was doing stuff in the off season. He wasn't doing anything during the season. He's doing a little too much. Maybe I shouldn't have used him as an example. But anyway, but all I'm saying is let the athletes have their time, whether it's for the family, friends, whatever. They don't always have to be training. To be honest, they're probably in way better shape than any of us could ever be in our lives. So allow them to enjoy that time sometimes instead of thinking they always have to be training, always have to be practicing, always have to be doing this, that, and the other. They don't. They don't. It's that simple. I mean, Kim, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they are human, and um, I guess the challenge comes, Mike, is they don't have to always show you everything they're doing. That could possibly help, but fans have high expectations, and because of social media, they feel like they're just right there with them. And yeah, but I get it. I agree. They are human too, and they do need to have some time. I don't know if the Stephon Diggs was a great example,
No, I was having a little laugh with that one. I wasn't even being serious with that
but
one.
I get what you're saying.
I know he was doing way
He
too
was doing a
much.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah, but hey, then his girlfriend showed up at his football camp. Ain't that so sweet? Ain't that so sweet? But I'm gonna leave that alone. I'm gonna leave that alone.
I'm here to talk about the Texans.
All right, yeah, we're gonna move on. Talk about the Houston Texans. But the first thing I want to talk about is the newest development, and that is Mr. Nick Chubb. Now, it was rumored by ESPN's Jeremy Fowler that the Texans and Nick Chubb had mutual interest, and then boom, talks about that it progressed to Monday. He's coming in to take a physical, and if all works out well, he's gonna sign with the Texans. And now it's come to reality. So I gotta ask, did you see this signing coming?
Not until I saw it coming, right? I didn't know in advance anything about it. Um, but yeah, it all moved really quickly. He was on the field today at minicamp. He's wearing number 21, so he is officially a Houston Texan.
Okay, it's wearing number 21. Okay, well,
Yeah.
he is in prime time, but he still can wear 21. I'm joking. I'm being silly, but um, I've got to ask also. He's been one that's been effective on the field, but he's also been a guy that's had multiple injuries in his career.
Yeah.
Does that injury history kind of concern you about him and his production on the field?
It doesn't concern me in June, and because the Texans don't have anything to lose, right? What does he
Mhm.
do? Get him in there, let him learn. He gets to learn the playbook. He gets acclimated with the team. He's ready for training camp, and you just see what happens. If you get, I don't know, 75% of Nick Chubb before he was injured, you got something because he can play. And sometimes guys need to change the scenery. So at this point, it's just we'll just have to wait and see. And a lot of teams do that with different players. Will bring you in because of the way the contract is structured. There's really nothing for them to lose. And if he turns out to be effective and productive, it's a huge win. And if not, you move on and try to find somebody else. I mean, that's just the nature, excuse me, of the business. So no, it doesn't concern me at this point.
Gotcha. And I'm very interested. I know last year they brought in Joe Mixon, and then after Joe Mixon, they had a few other backs they tried to kind of sprinkle in, but it just seems like now with bringing in Nick Chubb, they've got kind of a 1B or a guy that they can kind of hitch their wagon to potentially in December when you need those tough yards and you're trying to save Joe Mixon. I'm just kind of throwing different scenarios out there in my mind, but do you have any kind of way you envision them uh, using Nick Chubb as the season goes along?
Yeah, at this point, I do not. Remember, this team, we're still trying to see what this offense is going to look like because you've got a new
Mhm.
offensive coordinator. You've got definitely a restructured offensive line.
Oh, we're gonna
And
get into that.
but so I think it's difficult to know at this point, right? Like, what's Nick Cayley going to do? What's that look like? And there's some unanswered questions, right? You still have Damian Pierce in that room. You've got Dare Ogunbowale in that room. And if everybody is healthy, right? And you got some other young guys too. They drafted a running back and with the fourth round. So training camp's going to be really interesting. They've got to, if everyone's healthy, D'Amico Ryans is going to have some difficult choices to make in terms of who do you move on from? Right? Like for instance, Damian Pierce, he's a part of special teams in the return game, but he's only a part of special teams in the return game, right? Dare Ogunbowale, he can return kicks, but also he's really a part of every play, every part of the special teams unit, and he's your backup kicker. So which way do you go when you decide, right? Like who you keep?
Mhm.
And I think it really depends on what happens in camp. And so when they put pads on it matters. But at this point, uh, maybe he's 1B in terms of Chubb, but I think he and Damian Pierce, a healthy Damian Pierce will be fighting for that spot.
I honestly think that this may be, I'm going to throw something out there, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. But I honestly think that either Damian Pierce gets cut or he actually gets traded before the season starts. I think this is setting up for that.
Well, I will tell you that I've not seen Damian Pierce in OTAs, and he was not at camp today. So I don't know what that
Oh,
means. It seems like he should be there, but this time of year, you don't really know a lot. Like teams are not obligated like when the regular season starts to tell you about injuries. So I don't know where DP is. I was surprised to not see him. I would think he's a guy that needs to be in camp. I mean, Joe Mixon wasn't there. That's not a huge deal. Um, so we'll just see, and maybe Damian Pierce is still recovering from last season. Here's the other thing, Mike. We know sometimes guys were a little more banged up than we realize. And so they give him a little more time, I guess, for recovery. But yeah, that running back situation is going to be interesting. And so I look forward to watching that position group at camp.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be something to watch. I'll definitely be keeping my eye on that. Another thing I'll be keeping my eye on is this commercial break. We got to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more Houston Texans. And, of course, I do have some questions about Mr. CJ Stroud. We're going to talk about him and more right after this commercial break.
EBO Beard Butter and EBO Beard Wash are two of the best beard grooming products for men worldwide. They help promote growth, keep your beard moisturized and soft, and enhance your overall upkeep of your facial hair. And with the new promo code MPAFC10, you can get 10% off all these products. Just go to www.etsy.com/shop/EBO Beard Butter. Again, that's www.etsy.com/shop/EBO Beard Butter. And again, the promo code MPAFC10. Again, MPAFC10, where you can get 10% off any products except for beard boxes. So treat your beard better today by going to get this EBO Beard Butter and EBO Beard Wash.
All right, and we are back on touring the AFC South. I said we're going to discuss CJ Stroud, but before we get into that, we did have a comment in the touring the AFC South inbox, and that is from TXX. Said that Joe Mixon and Nick Chubb could be the best duo of veterans to take it to the next level if they stay healthy. That's if they stay healthy. That's keywords. Two veteran stars behind CJ and Nico and Christian Kirk as well. It's another guy that has to stay healthy. Hadn't been healthy the last couple of years. So that's an interesting comment as well. Of course, it definitely could be a nice 1-2 punch as well. That would be interesting. Definitely be interesting to see how they deploy them. I'm very interested to see how that happens. Another thing that's been very interesting to talk about, and of course we've had a little bit of a conversation about it as well, and that would be Mr. CJ Stroud. Now, another quarterback in the AFC South actually was talked about with General Soreness today. His name is Trevor Lawrence. But, it just seems like that word General Soreness keeps popping up everywhere. But at first it was with CJ Stroud. It was, talked about like a pectoral injury or something of that nature. And then all of a sudden talked about General Soreness. So, what exactly is kind of going on with this general soreness, and when did it kind of make its way? When did it kind of, got to make its way into OTAs, or kind of something you noticed with him not throwing?
So first of all, he did throw today.
Okay.
He did throw today, and he talked to us. And I think I said from the beginning when we went OTAs and he wasn't throwing, and somebody said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think it was." I said, "Nothing to see here. It's OTAs." And I know that CJ has been really working, very intentionally since the season ended. And, and he talked about that some today. I think the general soreness, and there were no real specifics, it's because he's been putting in a lot of work. And he made a great analogy. It's like a pitcher. Like you're working and you're working, and sometimes you got to give your arm a rest. And CJ was always on the field. If you know anything about him, he always wants to go when he can. When I mean go, he wants to be on the field and play. And that's when your coaches have to say, "Hey, listen, there's a little soreness. It's OTAs. There's no point in you throwing because somebody on the outside who doesn't really know what's happening." Because again, they don't have to talk about injuries in the off season. So he made it clear today he didn't have any kind of procedure. He didn't get hurt before the season ended, but he's been lifting more. He had some goals. He wanted to, get stronger, faster, lose a few pounds, build some muscle. So he's been doing all those things. The inference was, without him being in this terribly specific, that part of that is it. You just, lifting, doing a lot of stuff, a little soreness. But today, like you said, he goes out a little rusty maybe. But you saw him throwing the ball like you would expect him to. He looked like CJ Stroud. So again, like I said, nothing to see here. But I think, and he jokes about it. He goes, "I know it says there's nothing. I'm fine. I know. I guess it's because y'all don't have nothing else to talk about. Ha ha ha." But, he's super cool about it. But anything that happens with CJ, of course, people are going to look. And then he talked about, the new offensive coordinator and some of the new pieces. But so yeah, CJ threw today. He put some passes and it was CJ as usual is what I would say. In the in the spring or now about to be summer before you get to training camp when they put pads on it, he was talking a little noise and so it was what they do. So yeah, again, CJ's good.
Yeah, I thought it was I definitely, anytime you hear general soreness, you kind of your antennas go up. But you definitely broke it down in terms of the different things and why this general soreness. I will, to be clear, his general soreness is different than the general soreness and the pain that Anthony Richardson is feeling, because Anthony Richardson actually had surgery on that shoulder and is out of minicamp because he
definitely, I
has
think,
issues with his shoulder. So it's a total different aspect of general soreness and pain, because you're talking about like I guess irritation with the AC joint and all those different, or just irritation in general in that shoulder, which that's alarm bells going off for me if I'm a Colts fan. But we're not talking about the Colts on this show. We're talking about the Texans. I just kind of wanted to do a comparison just so people can kind of understand the levels to this.
And even Trevor Lawrence, who's wearing a sleeve, I'm told. I'm not covering the Jags camp, but he's apparently wearing a sleeve. He has general soreness. So there are levels and degrees to general soreness. It sounds like CJ just really had some general soreness.
Yeah, the other two, I'm kind of like, I don't know, because Trevor had surgery there, and Anthony Richardson had surgery as well a couple years ago. So it's definitely I would say the alarm bells are definitely going off a little bit more in that direction than it is with CJ Stroud. But I'm just going to throw this out there. So what do you think is their plan in terms of kind of monitoring the general soreness? Maybe just to have him schedule some off days during the season, perhaps. Do you think that it will go to that far, or do you
I don't think so, because it's not like he had general soreness. This is I think directly related to his off-season workout program. And so I think this is way too soon to talk about any of that until you get through camp and you start playing. I mean, we're 3 months from playing a real game.
That's true.
So I think it's a lot to read into that. It is, but what you don't want to do, in my opinion, is wear your quarterback out in June. So give him a couple of days off at OTAs, so you're not giving him a couple of days off in September and October, when you're in season, unless it really needs it. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I just was curious because, of course, there's always a plan. Sometimes, teams come into certain years and they have a whole plan for the quarterback. And then the other year they don't. And I was curious if there was any type of plan in place, or if D'Amico had mentioned any type of plan. But yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting just to see. I mean, the expectation of this team is to go back to the playoffs again, and not only go to the playoffs, but make some things happen.
Right.
So it's just going to be interesting to see how that develops and how CJ Stroud develops as well, coming off of a year where he kind of came back a little bit. I wouldn't say came back a little bit, but he had a lot more challenges in terms of different things that he had to deal with, which we're going to talk about one of those things in the next segment. But he just had a lot of things to deal with, injuries around him, O-line still trying to figure things out. But yeah, it'll just be something to watch if anything does come of any general source, which I don't think anything will. Basically what you explained to me. But it'll be a fun season to watch, definitely in the AFC South, especially with the Texans and how they're going to do and fare versus the NFC West and the AFC West this year, that's going to be some physical football. But But yeah, we're gonna take another quick commercial break. When we come back, we got to talk about the offensive line of the Houston Texans. We got it. We got to talk about it, Kim. So we're gonna do that right after this commercial break.
A shift. A shift is something that happens and changes the dynamics. And that's what happened when Garrett Logistics was born. After 10 years as a sales pro in the logistics world of sporting goods, John Garrett decided to pivot to the world of freight and start a brokerage. So you're saying to yourself, why trust Garrett Logistics? Well, Garrett Logistics helps shippers improve overall workflow, along with increased on-time pickup and delivery percentages. Last-minute loads, multi-drop pickups, and more are part of the services with Garrett Logistics. They're available Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., and Saturday, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., all times Central Standard Time. So give them a ring at 615-400-8484. That's 615-400-8484, or you can email them at john@garrettlogistics.co or visit their website at garrettlogistics.co. Garrett Logistics, where the motto is, it's not just freight to us, it's your business.
All right, and we are back, and it's the segment that some people have been waiting for, and some people have been waiting to cover their eyes for. That is, we're going to talk about the Texans O-line. Now, last season, that O-line was pretty doggone interesting. Yeah. So how bad was it watching that line last season, Kim?
Listen, it was, they've had some guys on the line with talent, clearly. I mean, we know Laramie Tunzel, who was traded in this offseason. And they had some veterans. They made some changes. So if you go back to when DeMeco Ryan took over the team, so that would have been in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked about the swarm mentality, right? I think we've clearly seen that on the defense. They embrace it. They personify it. And on the offense, maybe not quite as much. And I think the O-line is one of the places that we didn't really see it. And so if you're not super familiar with the Texans and you're like, what is the swarm mentality, Kim? It is that, everybody goes to the ball, but it's about that energy. It's about that that focus, that intentionality. It's about the way the team works together, in a nutshell. And so last week when we talked to DeMeco, our first day we got to talk to him after OTAs, he said, obviously, listen, it's the summer, it's June. They're not even in full pads yet, right? You don't really know, especially with the big guys up front, O-line and D-line, because there's so much force up there that you can't see much until they're in pads. So until you get to training camp, which is in July, and you're a couple days in before they put pads on, that's when you get some real answers. But what he could see was that they are moving as a unit differently. He just sees a different level of buying into and energy. And he never talked last year about the O-line in terms of, in a way that inferred they didn't personify the swarm mentality. And I think some of the guys in the media, especially the local media, felt like, I say this word because I've known DeMeco Ryans a long time. I covered him as a player, but almost like as a coach, maybe he was too nice or soft. And I never thought that. I am absolutely okay with the coach not telling us everything from the podium. It's not necessary, right? And I think that's one of the things that media members have gotten to where, I'm okay with him not calling his players out. He's not that person. He's never going to throw his guys under the bus publicly. But I do believe in the meeting room, he turned into their tails, right? He's tenacious. He's that guy. He cares that much. And so I think he wanted to make sure that he had an offensive line that personified some of that and that cared and really worked consistently and were good at protecting the quarterback, right? Many times they were like in CJ's lap, So
right.
Yeah, his numbers weren't as great as his first year, which was outstanding, right? Until, of course, last year, Jane Daniels came in and was, outstanding. But if you don't get any protection up front, it's a problem, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a big part of what we saw. So the offensive line was disappointing. And it's interesting because it's like at the first couple of games, they weren't that bad, but then it just seemed to snowball. And they made some changes. And so that's, I was on a show the other night and they said, what are you looking for? What storyline are you most interested in right now? I said, so for me, it's the offensive line. I mean, it's the offense in general because there's a new offensive coordinator, but it's definitely the offensive line. Who's going to be left tackle? Is it going to be Irsay, the rookie? I figure Titus Howard goes back to his natural position of right tackle, but do they slide him in at guard? Who's going to be the center? Is it Patterson's job to lose? Is it Jake Andrews going to come in? I mean, there's so many questions, and so I'm curious to see how that all shakes out.
Yeah, you definitely are one of many that are interested to see how it shakes out up there. Of course, for those that aren't familiar, they had Laken Tomlinson they brought in Cam Robinson. Ariante Ursary was a draft pick this year. You had there's another guy traded for from the Vikings. I cannot remember his name right now.
Oh yeah, I just had my whole roster. I folded it up someplace.
That's all good. But they did get rid of Laramie Tunzel. They traded him to the Commanders. Kenyon Green got traded to the Eagles and brought in CJ Gardner-Johnson, which, again, I'm going to tell folks, the Houston Texans has the best group of safeties in the NFL.
Yeah.
There you go. I'm going to say it again, but, folks, you got to see it to believe it because you got CJ Gardner-Johnson. You got Petrie, who's a slot guy, but, he's a safety originally. You got Jimmy Ward. He's the guy that's the worst of the bunch, but he's talented too.
Right.
Then you
Trent
got
Brown, who you're thinking about, right?
Yep. Trent Brown. And then I was thinking about Trent Brown came from the Patriots.
Right.
I was thinking of the guy. It was another guy they traded for. There was a backup. It's a backup O-lineman from the Vikings. It started, then he got beat out for the job, and then they traded him this offseason. I can't remember his name, but yeah, they post June 1st cut was Shaq Mason, who's a Middle Tennessee native, by the way. So yeah, they got rid of a lot of different people, and I went on one thing. I know I've heard some Texans fans, and they might get their wish this season, but some Texans fans that I know do not want Juice Scruggs to start. So they might get their wish. I don't know, but I'm just interested what you think about them bringing in Cam Robinson, because I've seen Cam Robinson when he played for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and that was quite an amazing, interesting experience, by the way. So he's now a member of the Houston Texans, and I'm kind of
Cam played for the Vikings last year.
Yeah,
Cam
he did.
was the guy who played for the Vikings last year.
No, it's another guy they traded for, but I just can't remember his name. I can't remember his name. Don't worry about it. Don't even worry about it.
Last year for the Vikings.
Yeah, he got traded from the Jaguars to the Vikings.
Traded from the Jaguars.
And there's a backup O-lineman I think they traded for too from the Vikings, but don't even worry about it. It's not even that important. But
so here's the thing. And I think it may have been a guard you're talking about. I think you're talking about Ed Ingram.
Yeah. There we go.
He's the guard. So what do I think about Cam Robinson? I don't really yet. I wasn't super excited when I heard the signing, but here's what I
was shocked, to be honest. I was shocked.
I was surprised. I was like, curious.
you had the same response I did.
But I trust DeMeco Ryans, right? I do. I trust, what he sees and what he knows, and they're not gonna hit on everybody, but I do. And DeMeco says he has a lot of trust in Nick Caserio. I'm getting there, because I didn't start there with Nick. I didn't think he knew what the hell he was doing, quite frankly, when he first got here, and I thought it was really overrated. However, I digress. I think Nick's done a really good job. of putting together, assembling a roster, and working with D'Amico, which is really important, right? That the GM and the coach can kind of work hand in hand and putting together the field and the team that they think can be effective, productive, and ultimately win. But no, not a lot of thoughts about it. I'm like, yeah, okay, Cam Robinson. So again, camp's going to be super important, and I'm really interested in that. I think bringing in a guy like Nick Caley as the offensive coordinator, the changes you make in terms of the offensive line coach, I see them really working on fundamentals. I will tell you that like today, Ursary got a lot of reps with the ones, right? He was working with the first team guys a whole lot. So, not that means anything yet, because it's June. And I always go back to reminding people it's June, it's mini camp, and they're not in pads. But the guys on the defense are they're going to be all world, right? I mean, Will Anderson Jr. is just like creating all kind of havoc and chaos come around the edge. I mean, and they're in shorts. But I think that the defense is going to be really special, and I'm really curious about the offense. One of the guys asked CJ today, he said, what excites you most about Nick Caley? And he said everything. And that's the new offensive coordinator. He said he's just, his energy. He said, I don't really get caught up in systems. I mean, impressed by systems or caught up in the systems, however you put it, but more into people. And so he likes that. And he's so, when the quarterback's excited about the OC, that's a good thing. Which may shed some light on some of the challenges that existed last year that I think is really cool that we never knew about, right? Because that's the culture of this team. So, yeah.
I honestly, I'm just interested. I'm just like, I'm still amazed that Bobby Slowick went from being a head coaching candidate to being out the door the next year. That still kind of amazes me. It's been a while since that decision happened, but it's just it's amazing that he went from a head coaching candidate to now being out of an offensive coordinator job in the NFL.
Listen,
it's still shocking to me.
It is why they call it the NFL, which also stands for not for long, right? So when the window is there and the opportunity is there, you got to take it, because look how much it changed, But here's a quote that CJ said about, he was asked, what excites you most about Nick Caley's offense? And he said, him as a person, I think for me, I buy into people. I really don't buy into systems. And he said, I kind of have that thing just about life. And so you could just see how his face kind of lit up. He's excited about the new OC. That's good.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it definitely is a good thing. But, another good thing that we want to talk about on this show, that would be Kim's new book. Kim's new book is out, y'all. It is out. It is out. It is out. You see it on the screen if you're looking. Hold it back up again. Hold it back up again. It's Sports, My Love Language. It's Complicated. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you. Book. Appreciate that. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, of course. So I've got to ask, and we're going to turn this last segment into basically talking about you and your book. So when did you decide to start writing this book?
So the truth is, many years ago, right? I'm a writer, I'm a storyteller, and my mother, who's no longer here with us, and my best friend Zena Garrison have been saying forever, like, you should be writing books. And so I said, I'm going to do it. And then, years ago, I had this, well, how's it going to get published? And had all of it, because everything had to be worked out in my mind for things to happen. And so when I evolved and matured from that and thought, okay, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write this book. I've probably written the book 10 times, like it's 10 different ways. And finally I said, what it needs to be is finished. And here's one of the struggles for me. So the book is, I don't want to say memoir, but kind of autobiographical, if you will, kind of mixed with a blueprint of my journey. And for anyone who's interested in being a part of media or a part of sports, or really just navigating through, you know, a terrain that may not have been really designed with you in mind. I'll put it that way. How do
Mhm.
you do that? And so I'm hoping this book helps people do that. But writing a book about myself, the challenging part was, as a journalist, like, the story's not about me. It's about other people, you know? So
Mhm.
I had to really and I'm not shy, I'm not an introvert, but I didn't, writing about myself and then like, hey, now more about me. It just felt a little disingenuous. So I had to find a way to authentically talk about my journey, but how can it be meaningful to somebody else? So I finally think I found the right mix of that, right? There are lessons from the field in every chapter. It starts with a letter to the reader, dear reader, the affirmations in every chapter. So it's kind of a, like I say, memoir-ish book with a blueprint or playbook feel to it. And that's
Mhm.
why I wrote it, and that's how I wrote it. And once I figured out that that's the way I could um, tell some of my story authentically, and also give people something that maybe they could use, it was super easy to write.
Okay. All right. So, for those that don't know, she kind of just glossed over a name here. Zena Garrison. For those that don't know, she was an incredible tennis player. She also was the first African American in 1990 when was a Wimbledon finalist. Became the first African American woman to reach a Grand Slam final since Althea Gibson in 1958.
Yeah,
Yes, that's your friend. That
that's
is
my
your
friend.
friend.
That is my friend. That's my best friend. And here's the
Hmm.
thing, this year, since you mentioned Althea Gibson, is the
Hmm.
75th anniversary of Althea Gibson breaking the color barrier in tennis. And
Wow.
so there's a lot going on at the US Open. Zena also
Hmm.
is a part of the US Open broadcast team. She does radio during the Open.
Hmm.
And she's kind of spearheading an event here later this month in Houston, where we're going to have like this day at McGregor Park. That's where we grew up playing tennis,
Hmm. Hmm.
honoring Althea Gibson. And then there's going to be like a little private part of it where we'll show a little bit of this a documentary about Althea, and then there's going to be a
Hmm.
discussion. And so there'll be Zena on the panel. I'll be on the panel. Shanda Rubin is coming in town to be on the panel,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, it'll be fun. And Kamal Murray, who's a coach, he's out of Chicago. He coached Sloane Stevens when she won the U.S. Open. So the four of us are going to be on this panel talking about tennis today, talking about Althea Gibson, and where the game is, and why it's just important to remember Althea. Right? It's so important
Mhm.
to talk about it, especially now more than ever. And if you guys didn't see Coco Gauff at the French Open, you missed a treat when she won her second Grand Slam by beating Sabalenka, the number one player in the world, in 3 sets. And so, whenever we can keep the conversation about tennis going, we think it's important, and especially with like this amazing stuff happening with the Americans and with Black women. I mean, Madison Keys won the Australian Open. She's an American. She's African American. I don't know that people really necessarily know that, but she is. And then Coco won the French Open. So now the next slam is Wimbledon, and we'll see what happens.
Right, right. But we got to get back on topic though.
I
About
get off
the
on
book.
tennis.
No, no, no,
Right.
no. That was me. That was me. I did that one. I did
You
that
did
one.
that. That's right. That was you.
But 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 what can people expect when they read your book and open it up and kind of flip through the pages? What can they expect? I know you mentioned a few things,
Right.
affirmations, and kind of mixing in, and how it was kind of hard for you to, I guess, write about you, when you're, journalists, things like that. But what's another thing that people can expect from the book from you?
So they'll get the truth about the journey. I think today in this media landscape, if people think off, many people think you just, oh, I'm just gonna go work at ESPN, or I'm gonna work in a major market. And that's not necessarily the process. I mean, we talked a lot about the journey and what are the steps and what should I learn. And so if you're interested in the industry, you're going to learn the steps I took, right? You're going to learn why it's important to work in smaller markets, to learn how to produce and write, and how to really be good at your craft. You're going to learn those things. I peel back some of the challenges, being a woman, being a Black woman. And so that part to me was a little bit challenging because I never wanted to make it seem like I was complaining or whining or woe is me, because that's not my story. There are challenges and there are things I talk about in the book and disappointments and things I've had to overcome. But I decided to take this path and to be a part of this industry. And I knew what I was getting into. So I never wanted to seem that like I was complaining about, like, oh, they made it so hard for me. Right. So I had to make sure that when I told those stories, I was authentic in what I shared, but I wasn't complaining. So you're going to find my about my journey. You'll get a sense of my storytelling. And I share some of the stories along the way that I think some of them are humorous, but it just gives you a sense of some things that you should consider, whether you're going to be in media or sports, or you're in some other industry that somebody has created this ceiling for you that you don't agree with. What do you do about that? I think in the book you'll get some ideas how to perhaps navigate it. And you hear me talk a lot about preparation. Like, that's the key. You've got to be prepared. And you should never stop. It never gets old. You always should be prepared. And I stress that a lot.
Okay. And for those that aren't, haven't bought the book and are very interested in purchasing the book, can you please tell them where they can find the book or any other information you can tell?
Of course. So you can get the book on Amazon. It went live yesterday. And if you're in Houston, I'm having a few events, and listen, I'll come to where you are. If you want to have a book signing, just let me know. If you got enough people, I'll come and we'll talk about it. But right now it's available on Amazon. I'm going to also I'm working on putting it some other places, because I've had some friends who are some people who are boycotting Amazon, and they want to know how else they can get it. So I will also make it available to where people can get it from me directly. But right now, Amazon is where you can get it.
Okay. All right.
The Kindle version or the paperback version.
Got two different versions. Okay, now. All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show. You talked about the Houston Texans. You talked about your book. You kind of brought people into your world with your book, and then also into your world with your unique eye for coverage for the Houston Texans. I almost said Tennessee Titans. Whoops.
I know.
Listen,
I appreciate you, and I always appreciate you sharing your platform with me. We talk a lot about the AFC South. So listen, I'm excited to always do that, and I appreciate the invitation.
Definitely. Can you tell everyone where they can find you on social media?
Of course. So on Twitter is what I call it, or X, Kim Y. Davis. And then on Instagram, I'm Kim Y. Davis Media. And I am Kim Y. Davis on YouTube, and also on YouTube. What's the other one? Facebook. So you can find me all those places. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Kim Y. Davis. And obviously I use the Y because Kim Davis is kind of common, although I'm not, but my name is. So Kim Y. Davis, if you look me up, you can find me most places. But Kim Y. Davis Media on Instagram and YouTube, and then Facebook, and then Kim Y. Davis on Twitter.
All right. Now I did almost slip up and say Tennessee. And of course, someone had to mention that to me. I know it was coming. But of course, my name is Mike Patton. You can find me on the artist formerly known as Twitter. at Mike Patton 82. That's MikePatton 82. The reason why I say the artist formerly known as Twitter, because I won't be calling it X, because the only X I recognize is DMX and Malcolm X. That is it.
Yeah.
So you can also find me on
Good.
Blue Sky at Mike Patton 82 as well. Of course, you can find me on Instagram and Threads at that's THA, not THE _general_MP. You can find Touring the AFC South on all listening platforms, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, you name it, we are there. Also, we are on the YouTube channels as well, of course, the Mike Patton Network. And you can also find me writing for Athlon Sports now. So yeah, I'm doing more writing there. Thank you. You can find me writing there on the Tennessee Titans. Hopefully I'll be able to start writing eventually on all the teams in the division, but we'll see what happens. I don't really have too much control over that. So thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Touring the AFC South, episode 342. Wow. A lot of episodes. Thanks. I can't believe I've made this many episodes. But anyway, thank you all for tuning into this episode of Touring the AFC South. We're out. Peace.